1994 was quite a year. We did a lot of things, and I don't know how we got them all done. This was a major project early this spring, this scale. We had to tear down 2 houses here and dig out the basements, burn them up. Then we had to excavate for this scale. It took about 3 months to get it in because the contractors and the rain and everything didn't help get it accomplished too well. Then we reseeded the yards here and put in sprinklers so we could water the grass, and had to take out the old scale. This was a major project for 1994. We'll go over here where the old scale was, and we can see how it looks different than it did in a year ago at this time. A year ago, all the trucks came in on this side. Now they're coming in from this side. We had had to pull the platform off the scale here. We had the scale in here. We jacked the deck off. We pulled the deck off with the loader, and then drug it and put it by Chico's house. The dozer, we dozed in the foundation of the old scale and then hauled dirt in here to cover up the hole. As you can see, we're to the grass planting stage, but not quite yet. Our intention is to put a sprinkler system and plant grass in here in order to improve the aesthetics of the location. This past year, we also had to upgrade our vehicle fleet somewhat. We bought a couple pickups, the 1993 Ford pickup here, the white one. The red one's a 1995 3/4 ton pickup. The other pickups we had 180 and 150,000 miles on them, so we figured we better do a little upgrading, otherwise we might be walking pretty soon. We'll take you for a tour here in the pickup. We'll take you in this 1995 3/4 ton Ford pickup for a tour of the feed lot. This pickup's really a good pickup, and it starts right up. We'll head over to the feed area from the scale and head to the northeast. We've got some of our equipment parked here in the shed that we've supposedly cleaned up a little bit so it doesn't rust out. We've got a couple loaders here, a 966, which is a 68 model, a 920 Cat, which is a 72 model, and some various trucks and stuff in there that we use in our feeding operation. And we're coming up on the feed storage area. We've cemented a large area here with asphalt, and we grind our corn. We have our silage and ground hay in here. The ground corn we mix with screenings and Milo and whatever else. We have 2 tub grinders we use to grind the corn, so we can do quite a bit of grinding at one time. We're using currently the WA-250 to load the feed. It's a 1994 model Komatsu loader with a 2.5 yard bucket. It's really quite a good machine. It's got a lot of improvements over some of the older equipment. We're going to watch them load feed here with the loader and the trucks and see how the loading of the feed goes. The first ingredient he's putting in is ground alfalfa hay. We use dry hay in order to provide the protein and also vitamin A, which is an essential ingredient for the lambs. We find the dry hay is probably one of the best feeds that we can use for livestock. You'll notice that he dumps it into the load, and the truck is mixing as he loads it, and it then helps the feed to become homogeneous. Now he's headed towards the protein dispenser. This is a machine we made out of an old manure spreader. Build a radio control for it, where he just accesses the button, the machine comes on and runs for a period of 16 seconds in order to put in 110 pounds of protein per cycle. We're using a mixture of Bovatech and a supplement in there. We use a mixture here of Bovatech and mineral supplement. The Bovatech's inserted in the feed for control of coccidiosis. It seems to work fairly well to keep the disease in the lambs down, and that's the main reason we put it in there. It's also a growth enhancer that helps the lambs gain weight a little better. Loads a scoop of ground corn with it. That also helps to mix the protein supplement in the feed better. You should have about 220 pounds of protein supplement in that mix. You'll notice the loader runs rather smoothly doesn't have a lot of jerks in it like a lot of the older equipment did. Makes the productivity of the operator a plus and not a minus. Gives him better control over what he's doing. You'll notice there's a mixture inside the pile there of ground corn and corn screenings. Corn screenings are the reddish colored product, and the ground corn is this product here that's looks like it's caked a little bit. We add water to the corn as we grind it to keep the dust down, and that helps keep the corn in a good condition. It also stays virtually in a good state in the pile if we add just a little bit of water. That mixture he put on that truck's 1 hay, 3 corn, which would be a full feed for fat lambs. We'll take and follow him and watch him feed it and show you how the feeding operation of the lambs goes, and we'll show you how we use that feed to feed it on the ground without a lot of extra concrete bunks. We'll follow the truck out here. We're not sure what pens he's going to, but we'll see where he goes, and you'll watch how the feeding operation goes. He's heading south between pens 6 and 5. We've renumbered all these pens so many times but we can't hardly remember what the numbers are currently. This used to be pen 2, but now it's 6. One time it was pen 7. One time we numbered them one direction, then we redid them all, and after you've been here a while, you kind of got to look at the numbers so you don't get too confused. You'll notice the lambs eating along the side of the fence here. We use that system because the sheep naturally eat off the ground, and by not having a bunk there, they do what's natural to them, eat off the ground. We're one of the few feedlots that uses the feeding on the side. A lot of them use feeder boxes, but we don't find that's very advantageous. You'll notice that the feed comes out the side of the truck and he puts it in the feed bunk. The object is to feed the sheep the amount of feed that they'll eat, and not a whole lot extra, because we don't want to have spoilage or waste in the feed bunk. The hardest part of the feeding operation is to watch and make sure that the guys are feeding just enough feed. We have, you'll notice the lambs all run to the feed while he's feeding there in the alleyway. The sheep know when it's time to eat. They gain a habit of following the feed truck. And when they come running for feed, that shows that they're hungry. I don't think these are as hungry as they look, but they like to eat. The object is to allow the sheep to eat up all the old feed before new feed's put in there. We spend a lot of time driving around making sure that that kind of a practice gets done. Yet the guys are always falling back into the old habit of feeding too much. That seems to be the biggest problem, rather than not feeding enough. With Walter Nelson here, and he's going to tell us what he's been doing today. You can give us an idea of what's going on here.
Just been sorting some lambs and moving some around, and just the usual stuff.
So how many did you sort today? Was it 1 or 2 or 5,000?
About 3,500.
Do these alleys here work pretty good for sorting, or do they need a lot of modification and improvement?
Oh, they work pretty good. We're done 3 o'clock, and we didn't start sorting until about 11, so.
Well, that's pretty good. Tell us how you designed all these sorting chutes and what the gates do and whatever.
Well, they basically just come down the alley into a small chute, and then you take a gate and cut them whichever direction you want them to group them into.
So what were you grouping them into?
The ones that were doing real well went into the big pen, and the ones that needed to be little attention given to them went into the smaller pen.
Well, the question remains, were there more of the ones that went into the smaller pen or the bigger pen?
Yes. So that's about it.
Is that all you got to say?
That's all.
Well, last week we had one of the most dramatic elections in recent history. What do you think of it?
I think it's just the same old thing, probably. They'll vote themselves a pay raise here in a couple of weeks, and then they'll have a lot of hearings and junk and won't do anything.
Just raise our taxes.
Raise taxes and spend, like one guy, I asked him what they were going to do with that tax money they got from the tobacco tax if that would have passed. He said, well, they would have spent it.
Well, that's about what they do. So do you think there's a conspiracy?
Oh yeah, there's definitely.
We're back. We're live here in front of the corn grinder. The corn grinder is a daily operation. We have to grind whole corn. We add water to the corn, keep the dust down. Chico's operate the loader. He takes the scoop, dumps the scoop whole corn into the tub grinder, which is a hammer mill, which hammers the corn in two, then we get ground corn. Chico's dumping a load of corn, or a scoop of corn, into the grinder. You hear the noise of the engine. It picks up foam as the corn goes in. It's a hammer mill that grinds the corn very fine through hammers. We're back here looking into the tub grinder. The corn's going down into the hammers. We have a hopper made inside this tub, which was originally designed for alfalfa hay. The corn goes into a small opening in the hammer surface, comes out ground in the discharge chute. It's a cool 29 degrees out here this afternoon. Scoop after scoop is going into the tub grinder. This particular corn came in from Rodney Anderson's farm, 1.5 miles south of us here. He brought it in on a dump truck and dumped it off on the asphalt. So this is local corn. You can tell there's some difference in varieties in the corn. Some of it's a darker yellow and others a lighter yellow. I don't know what varieties that is, but it's different varieties, obviously, from the color of the corn. Another truck's come in this afternoon to load feed. He pulls in, backs into the pile so that any spillage is real close to cleanup. We're going to get a close-up view of mixing the feed. We'll take a aerial shot of the mixer and show you exactly how the twin augers in these mixers blend the feed together. As the hay goes in, the augers grab it and take and move it towards the front of the truck. This truck's operating at an idle right now. There's a sufficient reduction gear in the back to allow the gears to turn the feeder box. A scoop of corn goes in on top of the hay. The augers grab it, blend it in with the hay. This is ground corn like the corn we just saw being ground in the tub grinder. Keeps going around and around. By the time we're done here, the mix should be fairly homogeneous. 3 corn, 1 hay. Appears to be the mix for this load. A full feed for fat lambs. Pulls up to the protein feeder and loads on some protein supplement to mix in this load. There's over 200 pounds of protein supplement. Protein from the protein dispenser to the truckload. He lifts the bucket and the scoop of protein goes into the load. Now there has to be sufficient mixing action in the box in order to blend the feeds together. Otherwise you'll have an incomplete feed.
Okay, we're here at the east sorting chute and we're getting ready to sort. I'm going to sort for fat lambs. These lambs came in about 3 months ago. They came from Idaho, and they're big enough now to butcher, so we're getting enough sorted out here to make a load for next week. Okay, getting a little different angle here. You can see the lambs coming down the chute. What I've got to do is to judge their size and get out the very biggest. It appears to be enough here of large ones to make a full load, so I'll just keep sorting here and try to pick out the best ones. There's various sizes. Some of these need 3 or 4 weeks to fatten out, and some are going to need another probably 45 to 60 days. But there's some right now that need to get butchered. We like to get them at least 130 pounds. And over time you figure out how to judge one that will weigh at least that. It's kind of hard to explain. You just have to get a picture in your mind of what you're looking for, and then also be constantly comparing them with each other to see what they look like. We've got several really nice lambs in here. These crossbred black-faced lambs. They're getting some pretty good size on them. They'll They'll sure weigh 130, 35 pounds at least. Now we try to not let them get much bigger than that because the price per pound tends to decline after they get over 135 pounds. So you can get in a situation where say a 150 pound lamb is only worth about the same as a 135 pound lamb. So why invest the money in the feed to make him bigger if he's not worth any more? This is a job we do, sort lambs. I sort lambs just about every day. We don't always sort for fats. We can sort when we shear. We keep the white face wool separate from the black face wool because there's a difference in price on those. The white face wool brings a higher price than the black face, and so it requires sorting and dividing the white from the black. Now, also another thing I watch for when I sort is lambs that look like they need some attention. They may have a sore foot or not look like they're eating properly or have something wrong. Hello. Hello. Yeah. What's going on? Well, nothing. No, nothing yet. No, it's dry. You got any snow up there? A little bit, huh? Cold? Really cold, yeah. We're cold here, but it's not too bad. Well, we've probably got 20, 30 degrees. That's not too bad. Yeah. Well, I haven't heard anything. I guess be still like we talked about, probably February till we need to shear. So yeah. So I'll holler at you if anything changes. But all right. Yeah. Yeah, these cellular phones are real nice. You don't have to stay in the office to talk to your customers and people you need to talk to. You can do your business right while you're sorting lambs. And that's one thing that they've come out with in the last, it's been about 5 years that I've had that. And it's real nice. Used to have to always stop and go answer the telephone and spend all day driving around back and forth to the telephone.
Said that there was another child besides Ernest and
Yeah.
George and Grace. Tell us about that.
It's Hilda, and she's buried at Loveland. And she was born after Ernest and before Grace. And they told me, Mom said once, she says they were so pleased that they got Grace that they named her Grace. I mean, I guess they thought they couldn't have any more kids. I don't know. But she died in infancy. She wasn't very, she was, I don't know, 3 or 4 months old. And I remember Mom said that Grandma says, well, they didn't have any money to take her to a doctor. And I suppose everybody was poor then. And she died at Loveland. That was before they ever moved up here. Hey, I'll tell you, Grandpa, you know, when I went to school, we had to write about our family, and you know, and they moved to Denver and were married. And then the Panic of 1893, you've heard that in school.
Who got married?
Well, Grandpa and Grandma, they got married in Denver, the Free Church in Denver. And then they had that Panic of 1893, and there wasn't any work. And they knew this Swedish engineer whose name was Nelson, but he wasn't any relative at all. He was just a friend, and he had a farm up towards Loveland. And I think Grandpa, the way the family talked, he worked when he I don't know whether this engineer was the engineer of Chambers Lake or not, but they said he worked up there at Chambers Lake and helped build it. And but then he came back and lived on that farm. And they lived on that farm, and they said they were ready to harvest one crop of wheat. And they went one round and it hailed, and he lost all that. And he heard that they were making money with potatoes up in this area. So they moved up here and raised potatoes. And that one year they made a lot of money in potatoes. They used to raise a lot of potatoes. That was before, well, even when I was a little kid, we raised potatoes. And what else can I say? Well, I remember my grandma was pretty tall. She was a tall and thin woman. And Grandpa was kind of short, wasn't that tall. Pretty tall. And Grandpa wasn't quite that, he was smaller than we are. I mean, you and I, he was. And well, as he lived with us, and you know, one thing that I remember, they always had devotions. They really, in the morning, and everyone would sit, and then sometimes in the evening, Grandpa wrote a lot of letters. He would come in the daytime and sit at he had a little square desk, and he would write letters to Sweden. And they always put a dollar bill or something, I'm sure, in them letters. So they were supporting they're like the Mexicans. They send money back to the old country. And the one he was writing to, I don't think was a relative. He was just a friend that he just knew in Sweden. You're not taking pictures now.
No.
Oh, don't. Let me think my thoughts over. Shut off a minute and let me think them over. What would be interesting? That you might know, that might be interesting. Well, I'll tell you this. Grandpa came.
Go ahead.
Grandpa came over here the first time to the United States, and he lived in Chicago. And then he went back to Sweden. They heard this America was a land of opportunity. And, you know, you could make a lot of money and come back to Sweden. Well, then he went back to Sweden. He lived there. And after you get back to Sweden, after you've been in the United States, Sweden didn't look as good as it did there. So he came back, and then the way Mom told the story, I just almost burst in laughing. Because Grandma and Grandpa, Mom said that they just accidentally met in Denver and got married. I'm sure they pre-planned that. And we're going to meet in some place in Denver and got married. And Grandpa always says it was a whole lot better in Denver than it was in Chicago. I heard that because it was too windy and cold. They liked Denver and Colorado better than they do Chicago. So that was that.
Do you remember what your grandfather did in Denver?
He was a carpenter. And Dad said he hung doors, and they said he was pretty fast. That was what he did, was hang doors. And he worked in a lot of those old hotels that have been torn down. That's what my dad said. I don't remember that. And he had a little tool chest. It was about 4 by, well, you could put a saw in it. And Dad said they would allow him to, you know, take that. He had to carry that, and they caught a trolley. And they lived on the outskirts of Denver. When I was a little kid, I remember going down there. And there wasn't any buildings to the east. And I want to know the street number. I wanted to go back and look at it. But I remember there wasn't any streets. They were right on the edge of Denver. And now that's right in the middle of Denver. And I think he, I don't know whether he built the house, but he had it built there when he was living in Denver. What else?
Let's see. Do you know anything about him putting the gold on the dome?
No, he didn't do that. I don't think he worked on the Capitol. I never heard that. Did you?
Mm-hmm. We heard that.
Who did? Oh, well, maybe he did.
Tell us a little bit about your grandmother. Do you remember her?
Well, I told you she was taller, and well, I don't remember too much for her. She died in '34, and for me to say that I remember what she looked like, kind of remember.
Tell us about your father.
Well,
some of the good memories you have of him.
Well, Dad liked to read. I will say that. He took Saturday Evening Post. We had a whole stack of them things, and we finally sold some of them. We got a lot. I think we got $700 for half of them. But he would keep them, and Dad liked to read. I can remember he'd go to bed and read until he got tired.
Did he read to you?
No, he didn't read to us too much. Mom did. I remember she read Heidi and all those. And the Bible storybook, they read that in the evening. One thing, when they had the Living Bible, that you can read that to your kids, and I think they can halfway understand it. That's I had to put that in.
What do you remember about John and Grace coming out from Kansas City to visit? Remember anything about those days?
Well, yeah, I remember. I don't remember. Well, I remember them pretty well. They came out every year. It seemed like they did. And I remember Grandpa one time. They put him on the train, and he went back to Kansas City and visited them for 2 days. But he was kind of glad to get back. My mom told me that. He says, they were all busy back there working, and he'd just soon come back. You know, they were used to their old. As you get old, you want to live in your own home. You don't want to.
What do you remember about the Depression?
Well, there wasn't any. Well, I remember we didn't buy anything. I can remember that. And you know, everyone talked about eating out. Nowadays, you eat out at restaurants. You know, we never ate out at a restaurant the whole year, maybe 2 years or 3 years. But in fairness to it, we ate out about every other Sunday, or we ate out at relatives and friends. That was the social thing then. And now we don't eat at relatives. Never eat at relatives. Maybe once a year. If we've eaten at relatives, it's a new thing. But then we ate out at relatives, and we had the same type of food, except I don't remember tossed salad. I will say that. Tossed salad and dressing. We had every other kind of food that we had then. We had good food, even though it was a depression. We had ice cream and all that good food. Now shut it off.
No, now tell us about school for you in college, where you went to college.
I didn't like school very well. School was always hard for me. But my brother and sister, they enjoyed it. They loved it. Carol did, and Wallace.
Tell us about Wallace. What you remember about those days?
Well, Wallace was more, of the three children my folks had, Wallace was by far the smarter one. He knew how to, and I couldn't figure that out. The one that was the best passed away. He was, well, but he was sick so long. That was a drain on the family. But that wasn't his fault. I mean,
What did he have?
well, they took him to Mayo's and they said he either had multiple sclerosis or tumor on the brain, or maybe he got encephalitis one summer, which is, encephalitis is sleeping sickness. I think he had multiple sclerosis.
And he became bedfast finally?
Yeah, he was sick for too many years.
How old was he when he died?
Around 20, 18 or 20.
How do you think that affected you?
Well, everyone has their problems. I look around and you look at how it affects me, well, don't worry. We thought about that. I mean, death was, I didn't know. But I found this out. Everybody has problems. And for me to say that we had worse problems than anyone else, we didn't. It's like you had your brother Donnie. How did that affect you?
It still affects him.
Well, one thing, when Wallace died, the problem went away. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
It affected my mother a little more, and it affected Dad a little, but I knew, well, he was sick. Well, it was a long time. It was 7 or 8 years. It was a long time.
I remember your mother telling me that if she had known at the beginning how long that would have been, she would never have been able to stand it. But you just take it a day at a time.
Yeah.
And make it through.
Well, it probably affected my mom more than it did. But you know, I'd lift him in the wheelchair. I did that. Dad didn't do too much of that. I was young and strong, and I could do that. Mm-hmm. And you know, it makes you feel more, well, do you have a purpose for living? You're helping him, and you're helping your family and everything. Mm-hmm. There's a purpose to that. You don't look at it as a bad thing. I don't wish that on anyone else, but if you never looked at it as a bad.
As all things working together for good.
Well, at the time, and then as I look back, everybody's got problems. Man, I don't know. And your problems, I wouldn't trade my problems for your problems. Well.
Let's see. You went to CSU.
Yeah.
And what did you get a degree in?
General agriculture. And I wasn't a very good student. I'll just own up to that. But I enjoyed school. I mean, it was, but let me be honest that.
When did you meet Mildred? Or did you know her?
I knew her from, well,
for a long time.
Yeah, kind of. I knew the family.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about your children. I know you're proud of them.
Well, I got 4 kids. The oldest one is Artis, and she married Stan. And they don't have any children, but Artis seemed like, I don't know why, but Artis works hard. She helps me.
What does she do?
She's a nurse. She seems to enjoy it. And Judy's in Denver. They're starting a church, or they're working on a church, and they have a church there. They have 3 kids, 3 little boys. We got boys. We don't have any girls.
Yet.
And Clyde has one little boy. They're in Dover, Delaware. And I guess he's a captain in the Air Force. At least that's what they tell me.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen Clyde. He said he brought his boy up when I was in the hospital. I don't remember much about that. I was in the hospital that time that.
You're pretty sick, weren't you?
Well, I kind of remembered after he said that. I says, well, I've never seen your little boy. He says, well, yes, I showed him to you. And I thought, well, yeah, I guess I remember somewhat, but not very much. And then Helen has got a little boy. It's about...
Is she still nursing, or is she
I don't know.
staying at home?
Well, Helen quit nursing. She lives a life of, well...
She's a mother, full-time mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where do they live?
They live in Greeley. And Mike is a eye doctor. What do you call it? Ophthalmologist.
Mm-hmm.
He operates on eyes. What's in those? What else do you want to know?
Oh, let's see. Well, tell us about when you were saved. I know you were born into a Christian family, but when did you receive the Lord?
Well, let me say this. I don't know exactly when I received the Lord, but I became, I always had the idea that to become a Christian, you had to be good, Well, that isn't biblical. The Christian is that all have sinned. And I really realized that in high school sometime later. I always had the idea the way to become a Christian was to be good. And that is not biblical. The biblical idea is that we're all sinners. And Christ died for our sins. And that is I even think about that today, that I think people are disillusioned. They got the idea of being good as being a Christian. And that really bothers me, that I think that other people probably think the same way.
Mm-hmm. And what church do you go to?
Oh, I go to the church in Windsor,
Do you?
the Free Church. And incidentally, they really have a good church. I must say that. I like the preacher, and he really glorifies the Lord. And I like the people there, although I don't know them very well. The closest I got to them is when we went on the hayride. They come out, and there's a lot of kids there. And they're mostly new people that come from Timbuktu. I don't know where they come from. Hey, that's enough. Say they live by the Ten Commandments. Well, I beg to differ with them, because I think the Ten Commandments were given to prove that we're all sinners, that we've missed the mark, and we needed a Savior. And that's why Christ came, to ransom us. He loved us so much that he was willing to ransom us and die for us and give us a place in heaven and redeem us from the curse of sin. And by the Ten Commandments, we know we are sinners. If you say you haven't, someone says, thou shalt not covet, I think that's the 10th commandment. They're lying, and they broke that commandment. And in my opinion, that's why the Ten Commandments were given, to prove that we're sinners. Amen. That's all I have to say. But it wasn't, I guess it wasn't as hard on us as it was on some people. But there are a lot of people from Nebraska and Kansas that came into this country to work beets and in eastern Colorado. And part of the reason, they not only had low prices, but they had crop failures there was two things that hurt them: the crop failure and the low prices, and and they didn't have a relief system like they do today. Although they did have relief. If it weren't for relief, they probably would have starved. The people were honorable. They didn't go on relief unless they absolutely needed it. Now the welfare system is misused and everyone's on it. And what else about the Depression? How much money? You know, kids can just kind of figure out what's going on. Although they didn't talk in front of me, but we weren't allowed to have, we didn't take money to school except rarely. If it wasn't much more than a nickel or a dime, or that was it. I'm trying to think. Let me think this over, and then I'll tell you all about the Depression. But there were, when I started school in Windsor, there was over 100 first graders. And Observatory and Smith and Severance and Bracewell and all those other little things weren't consolidated into Windsor. They don't have hardly 100 first graders, and there's 7,000 in Windsor now. And Windsor had a lot of kids. There was lots of kids in Windsor. That's enough.